Well, what I get the opportunity to do right now is for the next 40 minutes try to discuss our formal process that we've been trying to use in 2021 to try to set some priorities and to take stock and evaluate where we're at. To do that, I'm going to walk you through our objectives and key result framework that we introduced at the start of the year, talk about the progress we've made both globally as well as across various work groups who also engaged in adopting this framework this year. So I've just posted in the chat, but for those who are not seeing the chat, just to remind you, right now, I would like for you to be engaging in this conversation. Want you to go to pollev.com/PatrickRyan800, and you should be able to see the question, what was your highlight from Odyssey in 2021? Want you to, if you see something that you like, go ahead and upvote it. And if you got an idea of what was your highlight, you don't see it on the list, please do add it to the list. I'm going to be, I've got this open on my other screen and monitoring everybody's input here. I'm going to be walking through some of the work that we've done that we at least targeted it to do and show the accomplishments of the community. But I think one of the things that's actually particularly revealing is several of the things that we actually, well, even to highlight very explicitly, our top two on the list, the Global Symposium. That wasn't actually one of our objectives and key results for this year. It's something we did and something that a lot of people got value out of, but it's actually wasn't one of our objectives. And sure enough, this year's focus on reproducibility and actually trying to further the science of reproducibility wasn't actually on our roadmap at the start of the year. And so it's good and valuable to hear from you about what your highlights were, and we can kind of take stock of how they fit into what we had targeted to accomplish this year. So at the start of 2021, back on January 12th, we had our kickoff meeting where we asked where should we go in 2021. We started, as we always do, with our mission is to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. This is our mission, and the question becomes, how do we actually achieve this mission? How do we actually move forward as a group to accomplish this goal? And I gave you this silly analogy of me and my wife and my daughter going water rafting and hoping to make an argument that if we maybe collaborated together, we could make some better progress, even though there might be some bumpy, choppy waters ahead. So we talked about why you all are on the journey. And a lot of you communicated that you were interested in collaboration, you were interested in generating evidence, and you were interested in trying to develop open source solutions to improve public health. And so I still believe that those probably are true for many of you, and it's kind of what motivates me personally to continue to be part of this community. What we introduced at the start of the year was the Objective and Key Result, or OKR framework. The idea is that an objective is some sort of ambitious goal of what is to be achieved, and that you connect that objective to a small number of key results, which are specific measurables to benchmark and monitor progress. And so the idea is that you don't just set some sort of aspiration, but you actually have something that you can actually empirically evaluate to see that you're making progress. And indeed, midway through the year, we went through this same process of grading our key results to see how well we had done. We talked a little bit about how to write effective objectives, and we tried to use this as a guiding principle both for our global objectives as well as for some of the work groups who adopted this practice. I'm going to restate it here because I actually think one of my key reflections of 2021 is that this was our first year trying to lean into this idea of setting objectives and key results. And while I think it was somewhat effective for some of us, I think we also didn't necessarily realize the full potential of trying to have some sort of organizing framework for the community. But objectives are the what. So it's how we express our goals. We try to set something that's very aggressive yet realistic to possibly achieve. And we want it to be something that can be tangible, objective, and unambiguous. And then the key results are supposed to be the how. So some sort of measurable milestone, which we can see, that we can actually tangibly hold in our hands to know that there's an outcome that's achieved that we can see. So saying we met isn't necessarily an objective, but actually saying, the number of publications generated, there's some metric that we can look at to actually see that we've accomplished some particular goal as an evidence of completion. So based on this, we discussed various different possible objectives, and we ultimately had centered on 3 objectives to try to prioritize. One was to generate and disseminate real-world evidence about 3 substantial public health issues: COVID-19, type 2 diabetes, and health inequalities. Second objective was to enable a community to generate real-world evidence using OHDSI tools and scientific best practices. And our third was to build an international medical product safety surveillance system that provides evidence about the incidence and risk of outcomes associated with drug exposures. And so with those as kind of our guiding objectives, we set forth to set some key results. And what we'll do is talk about some of the progress we made towards those objectives. So just as kind of a guiding rubric, if you set super ambitious goals, you should not expect to achieve all of them. Because if you do that, you probably you should really be asking yourself the question, have we been ambitious enough? And so we score these key results on this scoring range from 0 to 10. And the idea of doing this is just to kind of take stock about what questions we should be asking ourselves as we reflect on our progress as a community. And that could range from, if we didn't make progress, should it actually be a priority? If we don't make the progress we want, we can be asking, like, what can we do to focus or help? And sure enough, if we've made good progress, we really want to take stock of what have we learned and how can that become a better practice. And so with this as a guide, I'm going to walk us through our OKRs overall, as well as some of the progress that was made throughout our work groups. So first, our objective to generate and disseminate real-world evidence about 3 substantial public health issues: COVID-19, type 2 diabetes, and health equality. So our key results that we had enumerated, we wanted to have 3 fully reproducible study packages executed across at least 20 OHDSI data partners. We also wanted to have 10 publications accepted in high-impact journals with an impact factor greater than 10. And we wanted to have 10 uses of observational research by external stakeholders demonstrating our influence in policy and clinical decision-making. Now, we made good progress towards this objective this year. I think the community really needs to be commended on trying to take this on. I'll walk through each of these key objectives just to explain how I graded this to be a 6.75. So first, as it relates to developing 3 fully reproducible study packages that could be executed across 20 different data partners. As a community, we actually generated multiple substantial OHDSI studies, and so we made really great progress. We definitely had more than 3 studies, but the reason why I didn't actually evaluate us to be even further is because while we seem to be maturing as a community and building study packages, we are not growing in our community in terms of expanding the reach of our data network. We've now had studies that have had 10, 12, 14 data sources that have participated in a study, but we're still not at the point of realizing the fact that we claim to have a data network with 331 databases converted to the OMOP Common Data Model, and yet the level of community engagement and participation across all of those data partners to participate in these studies, we still haven't gotten there yet. And so one of the things that I'll just take stock of and encourage those of you who have data is to actively engage in these studies. You know, right now, as Peter just highlighted at the OHDSI Europe meeting, one of the studies that's going to be highlighted is an ongoing OHDSI study right now, trying to characterize the adverse events in a COVID-infected population. It's a great opportunity for anybody with access to data to participate. I'd really like to see that we're not just capable of doing studies, but actually capable of engaging our community in answering these types of questions. As it relates to our goal of having 10 publications accepted in high-impact journals, by my count, which could be wrong, but I know of at least 7 publications in journals with impact factors greater than 10. I think that that's a great accomplishment to see, particularly given that as a community, we have published over 100 papers in 2021, but the vast majority of our work is focused on methodologic issues, informatics type things, and many specialty topics for which the topic itself wouldn't be actually something applicable for journals that have an impact factor greater than 10. But the fact that we had 7 publications covering a range of topics, including some of our work in hypertension, some of our work in COVID-19, these are good demonstrations of what's possible, and I think something that we can continue to try to aspire to get the evidence that we generate out there. Our third key result, I think in hindsight, I realized isn't nearly as objective as maybe we would have liked. We had aspired to have 10 uses of OHDSI results from external stakeholders demonstrating our influence and policy. And without a doubt, we have had a spectacularly large impact on policy. Many of you are engaged with stakeholders and know about this. And we've seen demonstrated examples of our work contributing directly to work by the FDA, by the US FDA, by the European Medicines Agency, by the US CDC. But a challenge here is for as many that we've seen and can actually document, I think that there's an awful lot that goes on under the scenes. And it's a little bit hard to know that your evidence has actually influenced decisions. I feel like we can be proud of the ones we know about and optimistic that our evidence may be even having a greater impact beyond where we are right now. I'm going to remind you guys to continue to put your highlights in at pollev.com/PatrickRyan800 if you haven't yet. Okay. So we set an objective to build an international medical product safety surveillance system that provides all stakeholders with access to evidence about incidents and risk of outcomes associated with drug exposure. We failed at this objective. We set a key result, which was to produce a population level effect estimation and characterization generated for 500 drugs and 500 outcomes across 20 databases. We did not do this. We set forth to have 100 organizations with access to this active pharmacovigilance system with at least one user. We did not do this. We had goals to have 10 regulatory actions taken as a result of our OHDSI system, and we did not do this. Now, we need to ask ourselves the question, well, we didn't make any progress towards this. We did not make the progress towards these key results. Is this, in fact, an objective that we can or should or want to have? Now, I'm going to try to double down with all of you and assert that absolutely this should be. And the fact that we didn't make progress, hopefully, will be a call to action to get involved in this. I think it was last week, I had the opportunity to present at the European Medicines Agency. They gave me the challenge to provide the EMA with a 5-year vision of what's possible with real-world evidence for regulatory decision-making. And so I'm just to highlight for you very briefly some of the thoughts that I shared with them with a specific call to action for y'all. I told the EMA that they should aspire to do this in 5 years. I would assert that we in OHDSI should be aspiring to do this next year. One of the things that I highlighted is that in OHDSI, we have built a lot of the building blocks, the Lego pieces to build an active surveillance system. We haven't stitched them together yet, but we understand the fact that we can engineer a system that systematically evaluates data quality, and that we can actually introduce new tools to do database diagnostics, to do data set discovery and evaluation of fitness for use. Those can fit into a systematic process for doing phenotype development and evaluation. And indeed, as a community, we made good progress on components such as cohort diagnostics as a mechanism to do phenotype development and evaluation. And that should feed into a thorough analysis reliability assessment. And indeed, you hear us talking a lot about study diagnostics and all of the things that we've built into our Hades work packages. Now, ultimately, a system involves not having humans cobble together individual hypotheses and speculating about generating results and a few years later after the question being asked, giving an answer, but rather a system involves us putting the pieces together to engineer a solution that can generate the evidence objectively, consistently, transparently, reproducibly, such that that evidence can be used by decision makers. And I would actually assert that while we've made tremendous progress in all of these components, our failure is not collaborating together to put these pieces in place. And it's something I'd very much like to see that we try to take on board for next year. Now, the EMA themselves, they pitched this idea that there are specific use cases for regulatory decision making. They talked about real-world evidence being used for supporting the planning and validity of clinical trials, to use it to understand clinical context, and to investigate associations and the impact of regulatory decisions. And one of the things that I tried to provide to the EMA was a framing of how to take those words that the EMA use and put them in the context of how OHDSI thinks about the world. We think about things in terms of our analytic use cases, clinical characterization, population level estimation, and patient level prediction. And what's clear is across our different use cases, there's lots of questions that we in the OHDSI community can think about answering, like who are the patients with a disease that's eligible for treatment, or which are the patients who actually get exposed to a treatment, or what's the risk, how often does an adverse event occur within a exposed population? We conduct in OHDSI population level estimation studies to answer questions like, is the outcome causally associated with the exposure? Or we conduct comparative studies to say, is the risk, how does the risk compare with alternative treatments? And of course, we're doing exceptional work in patient level prediction, where we can start to answer questions like which risk can actually be predicted and which patients are at highest risk for which outcomes. And what was interesting is, as I was thinking about mapping the EMA's work to our use cases, you see that a majority of the work that's actually going on is actually low-hanging fruit in the area of characterization. Most of these cases just need us to answer the question, what's happened to them in the population? This isn't about needing to develop new fancy statistics or coming up with new approaches. This is just about us using the data we have to help regulators and other decision makers understand what's happening in the real world. There's nothing that should be stopping us from doing that today. And so while there's all sorts of concerns about inappropriate causal inference and observational data, and lots of ridiculous hype cycles about machine learning for patient level prediction, the truth is most of what we can do, most of the opportunity that exists to make big impact to care right now is just a matter of us coming together as a large international network, performing standardized analyses to generate evidence. And the other thing I introduced at the EMA that I want to highlight is the fact that real world data, I would actually assert, is just being used wrong today. Because our current modality of using real world evidence is that we wait till someone asks a question. And at the time that a question is asked, we go about servicing that request through a series of bespoke activities. We get a group of people together, we write a protocol, we implement some statistics to some custom specification. We then go out and execute the analysis. We get results back that don't make sense. We iterate and go back and forth. Then we hand the evidence over to whoever asked the question, hoping they remember that they even asked the question in the first place. Because most decision makers, at the time that they're asking their question, that's the moment that they want the answer. And so I would assert that one of the things we actually need to focus on as a community is thinking about how not only do we use data to answer individual questions, but how do we become more proactive in the generation and dissemination of evidence? And I would assert that this goes through a series of steps. We as a community are currently enabled in that we know we have the capacity to design and execute standardized analysis across our network. But clearly that's not enough. We couldn't get 3 studies done with 20 data sets this year. What we need to be able to do is be more responsive to enable fast evidence generation using some interfaces. And indeed, some of you in the community have installed some of the OHDSI tools, like such as Atlas, for example, to allow you to design studies. But many people are still waiting to write some sort of custom R or SQL or Python code to perform analysis, which basically guarantees that you can't be truly responsive in a short period of time. But I'd actually assert we can go even further. We can be fully prepared by producing pre-computed evidence that makes real-time evidence answer retrieval. All this really requires us to develop tools that generate evidence at scale and make the answers to all those questions available. And I'd assert that we could even go one step further and be anticipatory, meaning we could push evidence into the hands of decision makers before they actually bother to ask the question. Now, all this requires is things we've done. We need standardized tools, standardized data, standardized analysis configurations, standardized dissemination. That's what it takes to be proactive, plus a collective will that this is something we want to do. What I would assert is the biggest opportunity, though, is if we think about the time to evidence. From the time someone asks a question to the time they have the answer, our current process takes weeks or months or years. I would actually argue that our current process generally means that our evidence is irrelevant more times than not. But if we could actually, as a community, galvanize the idea of being more proactive, we can get to the point where we're doing things in days or hours or minutes, or actually just providing the evidence in real time. And this is the kind of opportunity that building systems and thinking about things as a collaborative, one community effort to build a solution can get us to, that we're not going to get to if y'all are continuing to work on your own on individual questions one at a time in a bespoke way. So what I pitched to EMA last week was that they need to get proactive, and that their current state of play is that everything's reactive and bespoke, but that in 2026, I'd asserted that where they need to be targeting is to be able to service these regulatory use cases and be more proactive across this. But my argument to them about why I think that they can and should achieve this is because I've seen in all of you in our community that we've done this in bits and pieces and pockets and individual examples. What we haven't done is come together as a community to actually tackle this problem as one activity together. And so while I'd say that we have failed at our OKR for 2021 in building a system, I'd like to passionately argue that that failure could actually present an opportunity for us to double down and actually focus on this opportunity for the collective good of what we can achieve together. I'll get off of that hobby horse to go to our objective 3. So our objective was to enable a community to generate real-world evidence using OHDSI tools and scientific best practices. And here we made tremendous progress in 2021 that we can be proud of. We actually had key results that were kind of interesting. We had an objective to have 100 organizations fully operational with a full technical infrastructure sufficient to perform local analyses. I can't actually grade this because while it is theoretically something that would be objective, we don't currently have a way of tracking which organizations are fully operational. Our colleagues in Eden are actually doing the best job possible with this. We know that we are making really good progress on that. We have many dozens that are fully operational, but I don't actually have an exact number to give me an exact score. What we do know, though, is that our goal of having an Eden Academy as an education platform to train over 1,000 users, we've made tremendous progress on that. And we also had a goal to produce 100 publications generated using or citing OHDSI tools, and we've made tremendous progress towards that. So I'll highlight in our journey that we published this year. We've got our list of 331 databases. Kristen did a great job of try to collate this list, but it really underscores the challenge we have as a community in not knowing who's out there, not knowing who's doing what, and the opportunity that we have as a community to try to actually bring all of this information together so we really know who is operational and who we can count on to join our collective efforts. The Eden Academy is thus, as of this week, we've had over 1,800 participants and over 1,400 enrolled. There's been 1,800 badges that have been courses that have been completed through the Eden Academy. So it's been a tremendous success as an educational platform and something that we certainly need to continue to expand and grow on. And for publications, in our journey, we highlighted that as of July, we had 67 publications that were listed and cited as appropriate. And if you just look at the last few months, we've had another 30 here. So while I'm confident that we've had over 90 publications, I think we've far exceeded the 100, and maintaining our bibliography is something that we'll continue to focus on. But we should be tremendously proud of the idea that a community has come together to take advantage of bits and pieces of what we've done. And while we've sometimes worked separately or in small groups, the idea that collectively folks that are trying to take advantage of what we're doing together has produced this much scholarship in over the course of 1 year is pretty amazing. And you should all be congratulated for that. Now, I want to do a rapid fire review of our OHDSI work groups. You know, we've got 27 different work groups at various levels of activity that are going on. I'm just going to showcase a few of those that did adopt the OKR framework to celebrate the progress that has been made there. Common Data Model Work Group has set an objective at the start of the year to develop and promote community adoption of the new CDM version 5.4. Although I think at the start of the year we hadn't actually decided that it was going to be named that. And the goal there was the key results were focused on collating a list of additions and changes to be made, agreement across all of the work groups, and then ultimately a release of the DDLs and documentation. Claire did a wonderful job leading this work group. All of these key results were fully obtained, and Claire even created a little meme to celebrate that the CDM work group killed their OKR. Our population level estimation work group and patient level prediction work group set a goal to perform methods research required to generate reliable evidence on the effects of COVID vaccines. So that involved establishing a research agenda to try to identify the specific gaps, performing methods research resulting in at least 5 submitted papers, and to observe that impact in the research in at least in design decisions. And here the work group, or the feedback here from Martijn, the group made tremendous progress on this, and as several of you highlighted in your highlights, UMAIS indeed being one of the shining examples of tremendous progress that's been made. Been made there. So it's great progress to see from our PLE, PLP working group. Our clinical trials work group has actually made good progress this year. This is a group we don't necessarily showcase as much, but Mike shared that their objectives was really trying to figure out how to convert clinical trials data into the OMOP CDM to try to enable and optimize clinical trial planning and reusability. This group set some key results focused on drafting recommendations and best practices for how to actually go from a clinical trial data set in CDIS format to establish agreement with groups that have access to clinical trial data to participate in this effort, and then to expand the team with varying uses and interest. And Mike and the team made good progress as evaluated here by the group. I want to have specific call out for Jake Gilberg in the health equity work group. At our mid-year, one of the things that I chastised you all about is that we said we were going to make progress on health equality, and I gave us a big fat goose egg 0 because we hadn't done anything. And Jake actually took that call as a call to action to really try to galvanize what's now become one of our most active work groups in our community. I'll also give Jake a shout out because you can see this screenshot of a very elaborate set of OKRs. Not only did Jake lay out a very clear set of objectives, very ambitious objectives for the group, but he also created an Excel file with very complex formulas to calculate his key result grade divided by the proportion of time that the work group was even in existence. I think Jake was a little bit hard on the grading. What I think has been true to really success here is bringing a group of folks together, getting them on the same page about a common mission. That group, for example, worked together to successfully submit a grant together on work. I think it would be unrealistic to suspect that that group would have already de novo generated evidence, but indeed they are working towards community network-based studies, and some of that work is being showcased and worked on through publications. And so to see the progress that's been made here is really encouraging. And shout out to Jake and the entire group. Our Hades work group is focused on our objective of enabling the community to perform observational research following best practices for characterization, estimation, prediction, using a cohesive set of open source tools. We set objectives this year to reduce dependency on a small number of developers, reducing the maximum number of packages per maintainer to 5. We wanted to increase unit test coverage to greater than 80% for all packages. And we wanted to release 4 study package skeletons and make sure they're directly applicable to users. So there was good progress made in the OHDSI community. You can see here that second key result of increasing unit test coverage, we did that, and we had a tremendously successful event as a unit test hackathon that really got us over the finish line for many of our tools. Where we still need progress, though, is we still have too much dependency on too small of a number of developers. And as many of you were able to attend our open source governance workshop that Paul Nagy was able to hold, and Stephen Wally gave us a lot of really important food for thought. While it's clear that our community is growing and we now have many thousands of active participants in our community, that's still putting a tremendous burden on a very small number of developers. And we need to figure out as a community what to do to try to mitigate this risk and more socialize and make an equitable contribution that everybody's making. But it's great to see the progress and the maturity of our open source tools as we progressed here in 2021. So thanks to Martijn for his leadership in the Hades work group. Adam shared with me the great progress that's been made by the OHDSI vaccine vocabulary work group. Their objective was to set a clear and complete standard vocabulary hierarchy and accurate vaccine mappings. The group started by defining use cases and problems for the standard vocabulary and succeeded in that key result. The work to develop the solution and implement it in the vocabulary is still is behind. And I think here again is another area where we recognize that as a community, we need to expand our ability to support one of our core activities, which is the vocabulary. We have too few number of people with the ability to actually impart substantial change there. And as a community, we've got to figure out how to make sure that we're not just pointing out that the vocabulary has deficiencies, but actually working together towards implementing those solutions. And I want to shout out to Faiza and Ross, our early stage researcher work group set some objectives for themselves to actually engage the community itself in early stage researchers, and did a great job in holding monthly meetings to accommodate new community members. One of the goals was specifically to try to gain experience by running a study. That hasn't yet happened, but certainly seems like a laudable goal that we can consider. They have been having various working sessions. I saw Faiza posted in the chat that Azo will be presenting on phenotype development, and that's continued to make great progress. And also thinking about providing educational resources. There's been some progress made, and I think there's going to be much more progress to be made in that space. One of the things that was actually interesting as I was going through and kind of summarizing what we said we were going to do and the progress we made, was a lot of the things we didn't say that we were going to do that actually have been pretty substantial. And just to highlight a couple, the OHDSI Symposium was nowhere in our objective, but we had a tremendous event where we had over 1,300 people registered and 500, 700 people were engaged at every hour of the day during those times. And so it was a great event to see so many people come together, showcasing their work. We've been having these weekly community calls. Craig took this over this year and has just done a spectacular job, in my opinion, in running this meeting. One of the objective measures we have for that is we used to have maybe like 20 to 40 people come to these weekly meetings, and we've now seen that the participation in these meetings has now grown to over 150 every single week joining these conversations. And then for those of you who are not engaged in all the OHDSI community channels, just know there's a lot of activity going all over the metaverse. We've got over 2,700 registered users in our Teams environment, 2,800 followers on LinkedIn, 2,200 followers on Twitter, and Paul Nagy did a great job of doing some analytics on our YouTube channel. As a community, we've generated over 80 hours of educational content, and that has been watched by, consumed with over 7,200 hours of people actually watching the content and taking advantage of it as a community. So for as much as we do in kind of a synchronous way, I think we have an opportunity here to have kind of enduring value that's been generated just this year alone. So with that, I'm going to actually ask you to go back to your pollev.com. Actually, first I'm going to drag it over to the screen here to highlight the highlights that you all have highlighted. The reproducibility workshop seems like that was a fan favorite. We had the global symposium. Highlights of the CDM V5-4 making it out there was great. The work on COVID vaccines was well regarded. Jamie Weaver's closing talk at the OHDSI Symposium was a highlight for many. Our contributions to the background rates. It's great that we've got some newcomers who are engaging in the conversation. We see the study-a-thon activities, working with Eden data partners to get them up to speed. Seeing the RU Institute take form. Our Hades hackathon and the unit testing that we've made. So it's been really great progress, and certainly echo all of these highlights. What I'd like to ask you to do, though, is answer the next question at pollev.com/PatrickRyan800. If you go there again, you will be able to see this question. Craig has been doing a spectacular job of running these meetings, but we haven't really figured out the best way to be most impactful and engaging with all of you. We have experimented all year long. As many of you know, we've been trying different styles and formats of meetings to try to figure out the right way to maximize community engagement. And so the question on the board, whoops, it's not showing up, is it? Let's see, activate, there we go. Hopefully that now pops up. You should be able to vote for which community meeting format did you prefer. And so I'm going to leave that up there and let you Tell us which of these different modalities of interactions you've had. This meeting with me doing a lot of talking is certainly not my preference, though somebody's got to kind of try to do a rapid fire review of kind of all of the stuff that has been done. I'm gonna let you continue to vote on that for just a second while I go back to summarize briefly.
Can you allow people to vote more than once?
I think I allow. I honestly don't even know.
Thank you for reading my mind, Craig. I was like, wait, I could only choose one. Oh my God, I didn't even read the whole list.
I thought it was a ranking one, so you should be able to rank them, but I don't actually know what I did.
No, I think you vote for
you
one.
Biased your respondents to picking the first thing they read they liked. So take it with a grain of salt. I didn't even read the whole list.
Okay, well, I'll just pop that up so we can look at that. We have about 5 minutes left, and I know that this is not the kind of thing that we can have only as a 5-minute conversation. But I want to personally thank all of you for engaging in the community, participating. I am being purposeful in being declarative that we didn't achieve all our goals, because if we did, the journey would be over and we'd all go home, and that wouldn't be any fun. There's a lot more that we can and should accomplish. I think we should be tremendously proud of the work that we've accomplished in 2021, our contributions to public health, to the current pandemic, to advancing the science of how to use observational data. We've made great progress, but I also think we should not be content. We continue to be a community of many hundreds of individuals who each have our own reasons for doing the work that we do. Most of us have some active counterweights that kind of prevent active collaboration and the full engagement in open science. Many of us are competing for grants or resources, but fundamentally, if we all share a goal of trying to improve health by generating evidence that can improve better health decisions, this is the kind of thing that we should be able to figure out how to all contribute and participate in a way that can allow us to develop the right open science, open community data standards that unlock the potential of data around the world. It should provide us the ability to work together towards establishing scientific best practices through conducting good methodologic research. It should allow us to contribute to and support open source development so that we can build tools that other people can take advantage of, including ourselves. And it should allow us to actually conduct network studies around our entire global network to generate evidence that could actually be considered reliable and useful and actionable to inform meaningful clinical decisions. So with that, I'm going to look at our preference here. Craig, it looks like we're going to be on the hook for a few different modalities next year. We're not just going to go back to pedantic lectures anymore.
Yeah, I think that works.
Let me just open the floor. If anybody has any comments or questions or reflections that they'd like to share with the community. George, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I think it's just amazing. I mean, so first I will say, I will reflect the chat to say thank you, Patrick. I don't know who gets, do we know who gets to thank Patrick next week?
You have to tune in next week. Tune in next week and figure that we'll find out.
Wait, my specific, wait, sorry, I lost track. What's my specific question? I wanted to get that out first.
Any reflections in general, Greg, George?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think, and it'd be nice to document this more. We're having an actual, so number one, we're having an actual effect on world policy. So let's just like, from the beginning of Patrick's talk. So just think about that a second. Think of how many networks are asking you to be part of have your database be part of their network and asking you to like do this or that. And then they do some publication or a couple of publications and they'll, you know, and that's the big thing they did. But we actually have concrete evidence because the EMA does tell you how they make decisions. Although the FDA, we know something about the FDA because we work for the FDA. So on both sides, we actually influenced, you know, life for 700 million people. I mean, that's not bad for a voluntary network that didn't exist before 2014. So I think that we have to put that in perspective and now just figure out how to go further. And I think that there's the producing evidence at large scale that, Christoph commented on. I mean, that would be a fun thing for us. Like that, I wish we could get together and talk about how to do that. Like, what does that mean? What is the true scale? How do we divide it up? Who's working on it? How do we divide up the thing? Like actually but it'd be nice to do it other than on a Zoom or Teams like call, but really working on that, I think would be really exciting. And then just the work groups, all the work groups, and thank you also, adding my congratulations to the equity group, but all the groups moving forward has been spectacular. So those are my reflections.
Danny, you had your hand raised. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I got to be shy because I've got very severe man flu. But I'll make it, I think. No, I just to second what George was saying, also in this side of the pond, I think it's quite remarkable the impact that our work has had from when COVID started all the way through to now, with the characterization studies, CARIBDs, and now with all the vaccine safety stuff that we've done. I don't go to any meetings with European regulators where those papers are not mentioned, and that I think is quite remarkable. I joined this community thinking it would be fun. I never thought it would have the impact it's having. So yeah, congratulations to everyone.
Anybody else? All right, again, I'll echo thank you to everybody for all the work that you did. We will probably have some highlights again next week. We will have a lot of fun. We have some surprises in store. We're not going to go into that, but also please do join us in congratulating and sharing thanks for everybody else in the community. Come up with a few names. We'll probably spend the last session part of the meeting. I'll just ask people to raise their hands and we'll just call on people and spread the thanks around. So have a few names ready, few people to thank for their contributions to the community, and we'll send out 2021 on a really positive giving note. So thank you for joining. Thank you, Patrick, for setting this presentation up. Have a great week, everybody. All these work group calls. Good luck to the long COVID phenotyping hackathon coming up, and we'll see you next week.